Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today it's time to carry on one of my very favourite series on this channel. Pokemon cards that are so good, they will never be printed again. And we're going to start off with Keldeo EX. Shout out to Aguero K8734 for this suggestion, because you know what? This was not on my list. A lot of the time, the suggestions you guys make in the comment section are ones that I've got on my shortlist, ones that I will get around to at some point. This was not. Keldeo EX completely passed me by, and actually, they make a very, very, very good point. Although it does actually tie in with another card which we have featured on this channel previously. Also, as a side note, this series is getting harder and harder to do because every time I'm trying to find free cards that are so good or have been completely replaced that they're not coming back, it is getting more difficult, but I assure you guys, I'm not just throwing out alright cards for the sake of it. I am taking this seriously. So, Keldeo EX then. What have we got? It's not the attack Sacred Sword, free energy, 50 damage plus 20 more for each energy attached to this Pokemon. We've had attacks like that for water Pokemon. They come around all the time. That is not where we are. We are talking about the ability. The ability here, Rush In, says, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch this Pokemon with your active Pokemon. Now, what this was particularly good with was Floatstone. Floatstone I've previously talked about on this channel. It basically just lets you free retreat with anything. And we've had a lot of retreat helping tools since then, but we've not actually had, Floatstone. We've had just a bunch of worse versions of Floatstone. The thing is, Keldeo's a basic Pokemon, so it can just rush in the active and then retreat. And this used to be played as a one-off, so you would always have a way around special conditions to get Pokemon out of the active, etc. But then there was a time where people started playing Excelgor, and what they would do was gust up Keldeo and keep it in the active with Paralysis, and Keldeo being weak to grass actually meant it was very easily KO'd by Excelgor. So people started playing a second Keldeo, so that they could save their first Keldeo if it was stuck in the active. It was really good. So why don't we think Keldeo is coming back? Because Keldeo's kind of come back already, just a lot worse. Like even Rush In, even just the literal ability called Rush In has come back before. It was on the Solgaleo in Celebrations as a Stage 2 Pokemon. Now, that's not a particularly fair comparison because actually we did get a better version of that, and it wasn't that long after Keldeo we got Zoroark in Breakthrough with Stand-In. Exact same ability. Although you may notice that Zoroark, very much like Solgaleo, but in contrast to Keldeo, not a basic Pokemon. Stage 1 Pokemon. And that's kind of the point I'm making here. We've had this ability since Keldeo, and this is the point that Aguero K8734 pointed out on YouTube. And also, by the way, just get this out there at the beginning, if you guys have got suggestions for this series, cards that you think are so good they're not going to be printed again, please, please, please let me know in the comment section, because I do check the comments for suggestions, as I'm proving by using this one here. But one of the things they pointed out is, and they're right, this ability has come back. It's not that this ability hasn't come back, it's that this ability hasn't come back on a basic Pokemon. That is the point here. We've had this ability on Zoroark, we've had this ability on Solgaleo, but they are both Pokemon that aren't basic. And make no mistake about it, Keldeo was great. It was a staple in a lot of decks, and I mean a lot of decks. being able to always get in the active was big. And we've seen variations on this. Minior over in Paradox Rift lets you to switch into the active when you attach an energy from your hand. So you've got to use an energy attachment for the turn and able to pull it off. I mean, that is not the same, not by a long shot. We've seen Pokemon like Iron Leaves that when you bench it can switch into the active. But again, that's a one-time when you bench it. Again, that is just not the same ability. This has not been seen on a basic since Keldeo. I don't think that is a coincidence. I think we can say safely that this one is not coming back. The second one, however, is one that I've had on my list for a long time. I can't believe I've not covered this, but I'm looking through. I've got a list of the videos I've done, and unless it's not on my list for some reason and I don't know why, I've not covered Secret Wonders Gardevoir. Well, this is an easy one, ladies and gentlemen. This is an easy one. Gardevoir from Secret Wonders. I had a nice little jokey argument with the lovely Shay Burton at Birmingham Regionals recently, where Shay made a frankly ridiculous comment, sorry Shay if you're watching this, that Lugia was the most dominant deck we've ever seen in the Pokemon TCG, and that's Lugia V-Star. I told him that was ridiculous. And the reason why that was a ridiculous comment is because Gardevoir existed. Now, it wasn't just Gardevoir, it was Gardevoir Gallade, that was a level X and all of that. But this was the best deck we've ever had. And I had a wonderful chat with Ross Cawthorn on the same broadcast where he confirmed that this was the most dominant deck we've ever had in the history of the game. And the thing about this Gardevoir is, if you've never seen it before, you probably don't appreciate quite how ridiculous this card was. And if you have seen this card before, you're going to be looking at this right now going, yeah, he's right. Because it was ridiculous. Like, the Pokepower telepass was absurd. Once during your turn, you may search your opponent's discard pile for a supporter card and use it as the effect of this power. So basically, your Pokepowers were active abilities, Pokebodies were passive abilities that were just always on. And this Pokepower was just, hey, use a supporter card from your opponent's discard pile once during your turn. And you know this is good because it's got that text on it, you can't use more than one telepass Pokepower each turn. So yeah, even if you've got multiple Gardevoir, it's limited to one. Alright? So that's how good this ability was. Absolutely broken ability, gave a redonkulous amount of consistency. And honestly, I could probably just use this ability here. This telepass ability, I could probably just go, you know what? This ability is so good that we're not going to see it again. One of the things we did see after this was Smeargle, phenomenal card, which let you use a supporter card from your opponent's hand. Now, that's a much worse ability, and the reason it's a much worse ability is your opponent has to have a supporter card in hand in order for it to work, whereas Gardevoir, the second they had a decent supporter in the discard, it was just online for the entire game. Smeargle, at least your opponent could play around it by hiding cards from their hand, but make no mistake about it, it was, just absurdly good. But then it also had a ridiculous attack as well, which stopped your opponent using Pokepowers. 3 energy, 60 damage, your opponent can't use Pokepowers. So you're basically sitting there, stopping your opponent using Pokepowers, while having one of the best abilities in the entire game that we've ever seen in the entire game. Yeah, I mean, come on, ladies and gentlemen. Just absolutely absurd. This is hands down one of the best cards ever printed, and there's just no way we're getting anything close to this coming back here. Not even close. This card was busted. And we're going to finish off having a look at Ghetsis. And Ghetsis breaks my rule I had a little while ago, which I also abandoned a while ago. Because you see, Ghetsis is a card that got banned. And initially when I started doing this series, I told you guys we're not going to cover banned cards because it's kind of obvious that banned cards aren't coming back. They got banned. And then I just had a lot of comments, and I mean a lot of comments, from people saying, hey, what about this card? And suggesting cards that are banned. And actually what I learned was, you guys want to hear about these cards that aren't coming back. Even if they're banned, if they're so good they're not coming back, they fit in this series and we should have a chat about them. So it's time to talk about Ghetsis. Ghetsis was... This is one of those cards, well, as soon as you see it and you read it, you're like, oh yeah, obviously that got banned. It is a supporter card that reads, your opponent reveals his or her hand and shuffles all item cards found there into his or her deck. Then draw a number of cards equal to the number of item cards your opponent shuffled into his or her deck. And also, as a side note, on the regular art of Ghetsis here, if you look at the computer screens behind, those are all card artworks of Team Plasma cards that were around at the time, and that's just a really lovely touch, and I love that they did that. So this was a card that did actually provide draw power. This was a card that drew cards. That is not really why you played it. And don't get me wrong, having the ability to draw cards was a nice little handy bonus, but this was a kind of card where, now at the time things were different. When this card came out, you were allowed to play supporter cards turn 1 going first. Now you're not. So this would not be quite as good if it came back now. But make no mistake about it, let's say it comes out now. Your opponent has 1 turn, they are allowed to play item cards. But they're not allowed to play supporter cards and they're not allowed to attack. Every single item card they do not use on turn 1, whether they want to use it or not, is going after you take 1 more turn. And also, they're going into their second turn, they can use supporters, but they're not going to have any item cards. And that massively restricts what you can do. When Ghetsis was around, we would have entire games which were just, you go first, you play Ghetsis, your opponent has nothing and you sweep them in a few turns. It was a card which really stopped your opponent playing the game, and that's one of the things that we've seen a lot in the Pokemon TCG in terms of banned cards. Cards that restrict your opponent being able to do anything end up getting banned. Yes, I know you can all think of an example right now of a card that stops your opponent playing the game that didn't get banned. Maybe half of you are thinking about Snorlax right now. That's not the point. The point is, this would literally have entire games which were just, I get this, you've got nothing, I win the game. Massively oppressive. That's why I got banned. That's why it's never coming back. So there we go. They're my picks for this edition of this series. I don't think we're getting Keldeo EX back because we've just had worse versions of it since. I don't think Gardevoir's coming back because it's one of the greatest cards we've ever had, but it was clearly too good. And if you want to narrow it down, even that ability was too good. And Ghetsis is not coming back because actually it just ruined the game. So there we go. That's what you need to know. And now it's over to you guys. Tell me what cards you would add to this list. Give me your suggestions in the comment section for which cards you don't think are ever coming back. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. And get shoutouts on the channel like the lovely Chelsea Rose, who's been a supporter of ours for a long time now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross and you've been watching PTCG Radio.